The 24-25 Women's Super League is on winter break and it gives us a perfect chance to assess every team's season so far. We discuss whether they've met expectations in the first half of the season, what transfers they need to do in January, and predict the second half of the campaign. Now we turn our attention to Manchester United. Following a summer of key departures, belief was low going into this WSL campaign. However, Man United have performed excellently, especially towards the end of 2024. We discuss how sustainable this form is, how they are to maintain it, and what is making them so difficult to beat. This is our mid-season review for Manchester United. Alright, let's get into it then. Today we're on to Manchester United as we go through every WSL club's season so far and review it. Manchester United, Harry, relatively a good season.
Yeah, very much so. It's a weird scenario to find themselves in because they are fourth place in the league, but for me, I think they've looked better than they did even when they finished second in the league. They've had a really, really strong start to the campaign. They've played some really good football at times. They've been the best defensive side in the league. They've looked pretty decent coming forwards on occasion. And there's just certain games that stand out to me where it all came together for Man United. And you know, this season we've started to see that when this Manchester United side unlocks its full potential, they are a top side and they are very hard to beat for anyone in the league for that matter. You know, they took the game to Chelsea. They battered Liverpool. They probably should have lost to Arsenal, but they still got a point out of that game. And that shows that even when they haven't been at their best, they've still got results this campaign, which can't be said for two of the other teams in the top four. So, really good stuff from United. Yes, they're outside the top three at the moment, but what they've done is they've set themselves up really nicely that they can take advantage going into the second half of the season and could find themselves finishing in a very, very nice position.
Yeah, there's always quite a lot to talk about when it comes to Manchester United. I think this season their defence has been probably the highlight of that team. They've been absolutely fantastic defensive. They've only conceded 3 goals this season. That's simply absurd after 10 matches. So, yeah, really incredible defensive record. I think that the thing that's impressed me about their attack is the progression. I think it was very dysfunctional, tactically very dysfunctional at the start of the season. But as this season's gone on, we've started to see them figure out some of the issues that they faced in those early games. And we've started to see players who weren't performing well in the first few games starting to perform better. I think Leah Galton's reintroduction to the side has been key. And I think Ella 2 not playing, obviously was forced through injury. But I think it's made United a better attacking unit, which for anyone who watched our content in the first few weeks of the season, I kept saying repeatedly, that's had to happen. They changed they had to take out Toon, they brought in Galton, their attack now looks so much more functional. And we saw towards the end of the year, they put together some really good performances. So, yeah, I think they've put themselves in a good position now. I think in those early games, they were somewhat fortunate in some of those results. I also think the Arsenal game, they were very fortunate to come away with the draw. I still think they've got a lot to prove that they can compete with Chelsea, that they can compete with Man City. That, obviously, we'll get to find out next week. But, I still think that's the only thing for me is, yes, they could get top 3, but have not beaten anyone yet in the top 3.
They haven't, and I think it's... Obviously, it's hard to judge with Man United because, as you say, they haven't played Man City at all this season, and now they get to play them 3 times in the space of 2 months. So that'll be fun to watch, or a couple of months. So that'll be
very intriguing. They could meet in the FA Cup as well, so we might just
could
constantly watch that game.
But to be honest, saying that they only lost 1-0 to Chelsea and they drew 1-1 to Arsenal is not a bad record at all, especially after what we've seen from Man United in the last couple of years against the big sides. I mean, they got, think like last season, they were absolutely torn apart by Chelsea on that last day of the season, and I know that was last day of the season, so sometimes there's extra, incentives going.
Chelsea had the attempt of winning
the league. They
they
did, but you should never lose a game 6-0 to a team that you're meant to be pretty close with. But for United, I think the Liverpool game to end the year was the perfect way to finish. As you said, defensively solid, clean sheet, 9th clean sheet of the season for Tullis Joyce. But it was 7th clean sheet. Sorry, 7th clean sheet of the season for Tullis Joyce. Absolutely brilliant. And the United defence have been superb. And in that Liverpool game, as you said, you had Galton who came back in and got on the score sheet. You had Turland who found the back of the net once again. Clinton had a good game. It's starting to come together. The midfield is starting to look a little bit more organised when they get that personal selection right. So credit to Man United over the first half of the season. Credit to Mark Skinner. But as we said, they've got a big couple of months. The second half of the season, they have to back up the first half of the season. They've done so well. The attack looks better. They've only conceded 3 goals in 10 games. Do that again in the second half of the season, and they will pretty much be guaranteed to finish second. Because if they concede 6 goals over a whole season, that would be absurd. So a big second half of the season, they have to back up the first half.
Yeah, I've been watching quite a lot of Manchester United throughout this season and recently in preparation for a player profile of My Letizia, which will hopefully be coming soon on the channel. I think what I've noticed is you quite clearly see an uptick in performance, especially in attacking areas. But what I'll say, because you mentioned there the Arsenal game and the Chelsea game, is I think those two games, they weren't very good. And I think you look at the Arsenal game, and that was one where their attack, it really really showed that their attack wasn't functional in that game. They weren't able to come forwards with much threat. It was only in the last few minutes where they brought on Melvin Mallard that they looked much better. Even then, the manner in which they scored was very fortunate. And if Arsenal were more prolific, were more clinical on that day, they would have won that game by a few goals. As for the Chelsea game, I thought United were outplayed for large parts of it. I think that a lot of people say, oh, well, United were really close in that game. I think I may have even myself, but I think a lot of people there having their judgment clouded because in the last 5-10 minutes, it looked like United might get an equaliser. But throughout most of that game, Chelsea were the better side. They could have scored a lot more goals and simply didn't take their opportunity. So I think there is still that gap between Manchester United and those big three sides. We've not seen them play Manchester City yet, and that will be a big test. But I think in terms of beating the other teams in the league, they're beating everyone other than Aston Villa. And I think they've played a lot better this season than they did last season.
Yeah, I think, as you say, I think Chelsea definitely could have been 4 or 5 up at half time, but then I think that had an effect on the second half, the fact that Chelsea weren't cruising. I think
Ramiro should have scored on 75.
She should have, but I think overall that second half was, United were in it at least, and I think that was no credit to the attack whatsoever. And the same as the Arsenal game. The reason United were still in those games is because yes, they rode their luck a little bit, but again, their defensive prowess really shined through. They managed to only keep the margins at 1 goal, and they pulled it back in the Arsenal game. They didn't in the Chelsea game. That kind of shows the difference at the moment between Chelsea and Arsenal. But for United, I think they're there. I really hope. I'm never been a massive fan of Skinner, never been a massive fan of United, but I hope that they go out and in that Manchester derby, the first game back, they prove that they are in that conversation. Because for me, they're definitely up there. They definitely can compete with the top 3, or definitely Arsenal and City. So I really hope they go out and prove it in the next couple of weeks coming up, because they are a top side. I think it's I feel like on live and stuff, we watch so much Manchester United. They've been, because all their games are always interesting because either they play lovely football and you sit there and go, wow, Man United have done so well and they're playing really nicely, or they absolutely fall apart and it's a little bit amusing to watch and it's a bit like, well, it's interesting to kind of dive into, because I definitely do think they have looked more consistent. That's the main thing for me, Man United. They were very on and off last season. This season, they've been much more consistent, and that is showing the fact they're only a point off second in the league. They've improved quite considerably.
I also think they've reduced their reliance on individuals. You look at the last 2 campaigns, season before last, they were heavily reliant on the link-up, the combinations between Alessia Russo and Ella Toon. I think last season it varied, but at times they relied on Lucia Garcia, at others they relied on Ella Toon, and that wasn't really sustainable. And then we've seen this season, I think for the first few weeks they definitely relied heavily on Grace Clinton, but recently the attacking burden has been shared, and I think that is a huge step up as well. And again, it speaks volumes about how that tactic is developing and what Skinner's doing there, because defensively he got that right from match week 1 and they've kept that up, but they've also started to figure out now how to break teams down, how to attack effectively. So that's looking really good. And yeah, I think United are a good side at the moment. I think with City in a bit of an injury crisis, with Arsenal in a bit of unknown with their future manager, if Slagers is indeed going to stay, I don't think they're going to do much in January. So I think there is a real opportunity here for Manchester United to jump up the league, get back to that second place that they managed to get 2 years ago, and kick on from there. They won the FA Cup last season. I think they'll be hoping to win another trophy this year, whether that is the FA Cup again or the Subway Cup. I think they'll be hoping to win one of those. So yeah, I think things look really positive, and I think European qualification for next season seems very plausible right now for Manchester United, which is a big step up from 4 months ago when the season was starting and people were saying, well, could United slip down the table this year? Because the summer did feel like a regression. They lost Mary Earps. In fairness, I don't think anyone could have seen Fallon Taylor-Joyce doing as well as she has. And she stepped up well into that role. But they didn't replace her. They didn't replace Katie Zellum. They didn't really replace... I guess they did replace Garcia in the end with Bizet, but that didn't happen until right at the end of the window. I think there were rightfully questions about how United would look this campaign, but they have made it work. they have managed to fill those gaps just about. Dominic Janssen in defence midfield, that could be a better fit there, and we'll talk about that in a moment as we get on to what this squad is missing. But I think overall it looks very positive for Manchester United, which is, again, a huge difference in the narrative of how we were talking about United going into this season.
Yeah, very much so. I think that, as you say, after that summer, it looked like they hadn't replaced. It looked like they were really going to suffer. And I think that although they may have not made the signings to replace, I think there were players that massively stepped up or who came back. As you say, Tullis Joyce has stepped up superbly and has looked incredible in that net. But the likes of Gabby George coming back, Riviere back from injury, have been absolutely crucial to their defensive
Chris
record.
Clinton back from loan feels like a new sign.
It's incredible. I think that players have come back into this Manchester United 11, whether it was, they weren't starters, whether they were injured, and have made them look better. And we're to be honest, I think we're also, there's a discussion we had that if they had the likes of those players, if they had Clinton back from loan last season, if they had Riviere fit for the whole campaign, plus the players they lost in the summer, how good could they have been last season? But I think they've done very well to, and credit to the players who have stepped up in the absence, and made this side look complete, really.
I still think they missed a number 9 last season, which obviously they have now in the form of Elizabeth Turland. And let's talk about the January transfer window then, because obviously that is now. We are in the January transfer window. United, as of now, haven't had much in the way of incomings, but we have already seen 2 players out on loan. Simpson going out on loan to Bristol City. I think that's a really good move for her. She wasn't getting many minutes. Makes a lot of sense, and it's a decent championship side. And then Emma Watson going on loan to Everton. So Everton obviously looking to reinforce that attack, bolster that attack. I think that's a really nice addition as well. And so that's good. 2 good loan moves for young players. That doesn't have too much impact on Manchester United's first team, though. That's what we're going to focus on here. What do United need, Harry, in your opinion?
I think the main thing would be, as we spoke about numerous times, is still that defensive midfielder. Because at the end of the day, Dominic Janssen isn't a natural defensive midfielder. She's had some recently, again, I mean, that little talk about a Liverpool game, superb game, but that was slightly skewed by the fact she got 2 assists and a goal, which isn't what you'd kind of expect from your defensive midfielder. And the other reason is that I think that you've got Hayley Ladd, who's heavily rumoured to leave. I think it's like Palace, Tottenham, and Liverpool.
Well, considering she's played 12 minutes this season, I think there will be.
Yeah. So you're going to lose one of your backup defensive midfielders. Your starting defensive midfielder isn't a natural DM, and I mean, I think Awujo's done all right, but isn't great. And you don't want to be playing Clinton that deep because I think you lose her attacking numbers. I quite
liked Hinata Miyazawa as the other option in midfield, which I didn't think I would. I saw that and thought, what on earth is Skinner doing here? But that actually was quite functional. So I think that could be the same. I think Dominique Janssen has been functional. That is the way to describe it. Defensively, she can play that role. And I know we saw her pop up some contributions, but I think what they need from a midfielder is someone that can progress that ball a bit more effectively. Whether that is through ball carrying, whether that's through progressive passes, I do think they need someone who can do that more effectively. I think unless you know you're going to have your starting fullbacks back soon, I think that's really important because if you've got Riviere and you've got Blundell, obviously Blundell is pregnant, so she won't be back for a while. But if you've got fullbacks who can progress the ball, that's fine. But I don't think that's Gabby George's strength. She's a very good defensive fullback, not quite as good going forward. Jade Riviere can do it to some extent, but it's, again, a bit more defensive. I think that's why they use Bizet in that role, because she could progress the ball quite effectively, whether it's through carrying up the line or whether it was through those balls down the line. So I do think that's why they used her in that role. I think if they could add a midfielder who can progress that ball quite effectively, I've suggested Teresa Avalera in the past when we did a video on one player every club should sign. I think that would be a fantastic fit because she does that defensive role perfectly while also adding, I think, a new dimension to United's build-up with her ball progression. So I think someone like that would be a really nice fit for Manchester United. But overall, I think that's the only thing they need, really. You look at that attack, it's up there. I think, obviously, if you could add top quality, you go out and get it. If someone like Eula Brand becomes available, or Clara Buell, I think both of them have contracts expiring this summer, obviously you go and make that deal happen. Yeah. I don't know whether that is in United's grasp right now, but that is the sort of thing they've got to be aspiring towards. In terms of what is reasonable, though, I think they could do a hell of a lot worse than Teresa Abelera.
Yeah, there's a massive conversation over United in their January. It's good about how much money they get. We know Jim Ratcliffe likes to save his pennies. Let's put it that way.
All of them.
Everything.
Nothing.
Yeah. So if I would be surprised if we saw any additions for Man United, and I think if we either see one, then I don't think we'll see any more than that. So. Yeah, United are in a good position, as you say. I think the other thing that benefits United is, their strength across the squad is pretty decent. The other reason, I think in attack, they've got some decent depth. We've seen the likes of Rachel Williams can come on and do a very decent job. If you're benching Ella Toone, that's a hell of a player to come off the bench. And if she gets to form,
if she gets back to her form, that's one hell of a player.
Centre half, yes, don't have any, but again, we talk about that defensive midfield. Janssen is your backup centre half in that position, really. That's why the defensive midfield position is, one that needs to be addressed at some point. But
because the difference is, you look at Miyazawa and Janssen, you say that's quite functional, that can work. But I think if it's Awujo and Miyazawa and they've got to play one of the top sides, the conversation's very different. I think that is then a midfield that looks really easy to bypass. So I think adding a defensive midfielder would be really helpful, unless you're 100% on Dominique Janssen starting there, which I think there are some obvious concerns. But if that is the way forward, then sign a centre-back.
Yeah.
That's the quite obvious thing, especially considering I think there will be clubs looking at Maya Letitia, top clubs looking at Maya Letitia.
Yeah,
because she is the best defender in the league, in my opinion.
It's interesting. We've got to January in a position where we look at it for Man United, and they're actually in a really good position. And I think it's been a couple of years since we've sat here and gone, well, they don't really need to sign anyone. If they want to, they could sign this player. But
I think Abelera would be game changing. I think it takes them from being competing for it to being really in the conversation then for second place.
Yeah.
I think other than that, it's about looking opportunities. We know that they are sort of pinching their purse. Is that the phrase? That they're not really spending their money at the moment, but if there are bargains to be found in attack, I think that's how they can add some quality. We know there's some good players expiring this summer, having contracts expiring this summer. I don't know if they'll be able to tempt Eula Brand, but you never know.
Yeah.
If they can add someone like that, not necessarily Eula Brand, but if you can add someone like that, I think that's a huge addition for United. They're the sort of signs they've got to be pulling off. I don't think Chloe Kelly takes them to the next level, but it could be a useful versatile attacker if that is someone they're looking at. Yeah. Yuta Rantala would be one as well. Free contract this summer, awful for Leicester fans if they're watching, but that would be a fantastic addition to this United team.
United are in a position where I think they're one top quality, world class bracket player away from being a real force, not only domestically, but if they are to get into Europe as well. So they're missing that star player, first name on every single team sheet, undroppable kind of player. And I think Clinton isn't
if
far
they had
off
a left
that,
winger,
but
you look at their attack, I think Clinton's excellent. I think Turlin's excellent. I think Bizet's excellent. If you had a left winger that's of that caliber or better, I think that attack suddenly rivals the best in the league.
Well, one thing for United is stop playing Heisei. She just is up for a fight. And I like seeing that stat brought around that she most dribbles attempted in the league. That means nothing.
Success rate's actually considerably lower.
So for just stop doing that, because watching Heisei this season, she's been up for a brawl more than putting the ball in the back of the net. But overall, really good start from United.
Poor start. Well, good performances. Towards the end of the campaign, poor performances at the start, but good results throughout. It's put them in a really good position now. And I think if they can continue that and Skinner can continue to develop the tactic, the biggest thing now for me with Mark Skinner is, can he be pragmatic? Can he adapt for those big games? Because I don't think he does. You look at the Chelsea game this season, they didn't do anything new. They did the same thing they have all season. It's just that that's been defensively solid enough that Chelsea weren't able to break it down very effectively. And Chelsea were very wasteful in front of goal. The question is now, can United sort of transition from this underdog football, keep the defensive solidity, but transition from this underdog football to being a bit more of a force?
Yeah, and I think that, as you said, that will decide as well how they do in the domestic cup competitions, because yes, they did win the FA Cup last year, but they played Tottenham in the final.
The semi-final was
got
anomalous.
Fortunate against Chelsea, let's put it that way. And meanwhile, Arsenal and Man City managed to knock themselves out in other ways. So I think that for United, yes, they did win the FA Cup last year, but it wasn't like they went on and they beat. I know they beat Chelsea, but as you say, that was a weird game. But they didn't have some incredible run where they played Arsenal in the final, they played Chelsea in the semi-final, and they beat other WSL clubs. it was comfortable. That FA Cup final was one of the most comfortable finals we've seen in years at Wembley. So, I would, again, as I said, I'd like to see United get to a final against a Chelsea, against an Arsenal, and put up a fight in that game. Prove that they can challenge at the top of the game at the domestic level. They will hope to back up their FA Cup success. And I think it's an interesting, from a United point of view, what is better, fourth in a trophy or Champions League qualification, but it means you don't win a cup. I think it's a tough situation because as much as Europe is great, are they going to go on and win the Champions League? Probably not. But it's
the revenue that comes from that, the attraction for other players, that could be so much more valuable. I think, obviously, I would always say a trophy from a fan's perspective. You want to go and see your side win silverware. It means more than this ticket to the Champions League. But I think in terms of revenue, in terms of the development of the club, and being able to attract investors and being able to attract interest in the women's team, I think playing in the Champions League is really important for Manchester United.
And obviously, they're in a position where they could do both. They could finish they could finish
indeed
reasonably. The form they're on,
the fact they don't have Champions League this season could help them in that regard.
The form that Man City are on, and the fact that Arsenal are still yet have got a horrible run coming, and there's still a lot to be played for. For me, Man United are in a really good position where there's a world where they finish runners-up in the WSL and win a domestic trophy. And suddenly, that is an incredible season. And they will absolutely take that. So, they've got to back up what they've started. This season so far, they're on a real good trend of getting better and better and better every single game. If they keep that up, they'll be the best team in the league coming into the season, bar Chelsea. But yeah.
Predictions, second half of the season. What are we saying? We'll start with domestic cups. League Cup coming up. They've got Manchester City in that. It's going to be a weird situation because they've got to play City twice in the space of a number of days. That obviously complicates matters, but I think that is a game they can win.
They'll back themselves in both games. I think they really will, especially with the cup game being at home. I think they'll back themselves to win that game, and they'll hope to go deep into the continent. They'll hope to go deep in both domestic cups, really. And finals, winners, wherever, that'll be that's the aim for United. It's always got to be the aim.
Yeah, and then obviously FA Cup, West Brom shouldn't be any difficulty. No. And then on to the round 16 after that. I think obviously it's draw dependent. If they go and pull Chelsea out the hat, it's very difficult to see them getting past Chelsea. But again, if the draw favours them, I don't think a run at the final is an absurd suggestion. It very much depends on who they get. But, if you get fortunate and Chelsea get Man City and then Arsenal, suddenly you get to a semi-final stage where there's got to be 4 clubs there and there's no way that all Chelsea, Arsenal and City are there. So, I think it depends on the draw, but a run at the finals or at least the semi-finals isn't out of the question for United. It depends on who they get in each round. But I think they'll be hoping that, I think unless they draw Chelsea, there's no one there that they can't beat. It's very circumstantial. And very, it depends on who turns up on the day. Obviously, no European football, but WSL, where do you see Manchester United this season? They're currently 4th, a point off Manchester City in 2nd, joint on points with Arsenal in 3rd, 4 points out of Brighton, just for added context.
Base, I think it's difficult because, City are out of form, but once Hemp and Shaw are back, they have gone out inside of centre half, so they could come back swinging, February time once they've got fit players, but for me, that might be too late. So I think you have with what we've got presented with the form that everyone's on. For me, Man United are favourable to finish up ahead of Manchester City. It's then close between United and Arsenal because I think Arsenal haven't been tested yet, and they have got some big games coming up against the likes of City and Chelsea. The form they've been on is absolutely incredible. The fact they have not lost yet under any Slagers, it is very difficult to say that they would finish below anyone bar Chelsea or even Chelsea. So I think United will, for me, they should get top 3. Whether they're ahead of Arsenal and they finish runners up, I don't know.
Yeah, fair enough. I could see them 2nd or 3rd. I could see them 4th. I could even see them 5th. It's that roller coaster with Manchester United, isn't it? I think it's very difficult to predict. If I had to say, I'd probably put them 2nd right now.
I think so.
Maybe just because I've watched an awful lot of Manchester United, and just because I'm trying to look for good clips and bits to use, but. I think from watching how they play, I think they've got a better understanding of a system than than Arsenal do. I think they've got a better squad overall. I still think City's starting 11 is better, but I think they've got a better squad overall than Man City. I think with the number of competitions City are playing in, that squad depth will be tested further. We've already seen Hemp and Shaw go out, and suddenly that's a mess. If there's an injury to Hasegawa, if there's another injury in that midfield too, if there's another injury to the back line, suddenly that looks a lot worse. I still think either way, I know they've just signed Knack, but that back line's still really weak without Greenwood. It still lacks leadership. So I think while City have looked good this season, I think there are a lot of problems with the fact that they've got a lot of injuries and their squad's very light. So I think United can take advantage of that. I think United have got one of the deepest squads in the league. The fact they don't play in European competitions, so that's 2 less games at least that they'll have over Manchester City and Arsenal. I think it's all pointing very beneficially to Manchester United. They've got one of the better injury records in the league this season. I know fans will point to the fact that Toon's injured, but I think that's made them stronger, if anything, not weaker. Because while I know the emotional attachment is there with Toon, I think tactically she was holding them back. Structurally, she was holding them back because I don't think she operates in the way they needed from that left winger. And if she is to play in attack midfield, you've got to bench Grace Clinton. Now, why would you do that when I think Clinton is a superior player, at least right now, than Ella Toon?
Yeah.
So I think that, United, they're really well set up. And to be fair, well, other injuries, they've got Blundell who's pregnant. Lots of left backs that are injured, but they've got 3, so they're all right in that regard. So yeah, they're doing really well.
Yeah, very much so. As you say, I think with the injuries to Man City right now, going into the Manchester derby in 2 weeks' time, I think United have got the strongest starting 11. I think they do. So I favour them to win that game, and then suddenly they're second in the league. They're 2 points ahead of their rivals, and they're having a great time.
Yeah, fair enough. I think that just about rounds up everything we want to speak about today. If you have enjoyed or you're new, make sure to get involved in the comments section down below. And if you're new, make sure to go and hit that subscribe button, and welcome to the community. Go and check out the rest of our reviews, doing one for every WSL club. We've still got 2 more to go in the form of Tottenham and West Ham, but every other club is on the channel now, so you can go and watch them at your leisure. Other than that, that is everything from us today. We're back with live streams this weekend for the Women's FA Cup. Thank you guys very, very much for watching, and we'll see you next time.
See ya.